Okay, Monday, this is Introduction to Computers. Week 11, day 29. We talk about defining network security, and we did some examples together in class today. We talked about terminology and spent a little time on project. Security background. We looked at a variety of things in class. Okay. We did a little bit with have you been pawned? We looked at net neutrality a little bit. We looked at reconnaissance. We kind of talked about hacking and security in general. So we looked at some things to get our brains thinking about security. What do we secure? Data. Data is the asset. So this is what we talk about in this class. We're talking about securing the data. So here are the things that fits into. We got three major categories here. Let's take a look at the first one. This talks about what do we mean by securing data. Confidentiality. Only those who should see the data see it. That's confidentiality. So we did a lot of medical examples and school examples. And you go to the hospital and they diagnose you with some kind of disease, let's say cancer or something. The hospital can't, somebody working with you at the hospital, like a nurse, can't go home and say, oh, I just saw Mike at the hospital, he has cancer, what are we going to do? Okay. Confidentiality. Who can see what information? Okay? Now, some of us have to see the information to do our jobs or whatever. Data integrity is the idea the data is accurate. I use the example, I get paid, okay, and the college's bank transfers the money to my bank, and they use my account number. Well, the data, if it's changed between there and they use somebody else's bank account and the money goes into the wrong account, there the data is not accurate, the integrity of the data. This really falls into category 2 of people misinterpreting data and producing the wrong or inaccurate outputs of data. So in the data, in terms of security, who can see it and is it accurate? And the third one here, availability, we have to make the data available. Okay, I have to see the student's grade because I'm assigning the grade, and then I have to distribute that over to, it moves from my work in Canvas, and then it gets moved into the next step, Web Advisor or whatever, and then it gets moved onto your transcripts. And during that process, a counselor may have to verify something, or if a grade needs to be changed for some reason, there's some people involved that are going to see that grade. Okay? So who has to see it? In a hospital scenario, well, the nurses, the doctors, lots of people in a medical facility need to see the data. Okay? Where is the data? What state is the data in? And we're not talking about whether it's in Iowa or not. Okay? What state is the data in? The data is either stored, and so that could be on a hard drive somewhere where it's just sitting. Okay, the data can be in transit, it's moving. Okay, that's where most people think about when they think about data. They tend to think about it's moving from one location to another, and then somebody here, either they see it, confidentiality lost, or they change it. The data integrity is lost. It's not accurate anymore. And the third one, in this case, is the data is being processed. And we'll talk about an example of that here in a little bit. Data that's in, for example, data that's in memory. When you typically log in and you type, let's say, your password to get into your Facebook account, while sitting during that session on the computer, if you leave Facebook and go back in, it remembers that password and different things. So a lot of passwords, other things are stored in memory. And what could happen there was somebody could access the memory. We talked a little bit about that. There used to be ways to do that. When you power down a computer, there used to be a way you could put a flash drive in a computer, power it down, and everything that was in memory would go out on that flash drive. Alright. Okay, so there's concerns about while the data is being processed. And we're going to give another example of that here when we get our next diagram. Next thing, I'll keep moving. What steps can we do to protect ourselves? We can buy products and devices. You can have firewalls set up for networks. You can have virus software. You can have different malware protections on your computer. You can have different ways to log in, thumbprint, read your face, or your voice activated, or whatever. There's all kinds of products and that you can have, and there's all kinds of different types of devices or equipment of different types to allow you to do that. Probably one of the biggest areas of security, I'll use a different color here, are people. Okay, people click on things they shouldn't click on. People have access. People allow other people to have access. So the whole gamut of people is an important part of security. Probably the biggest issue comes from people, either being too nice or letting people use stuff and so forth. We need to have, people need to follow procedures in order to do things. There's a procedure to change your password. There's a procedure you need to follow in terms of, who can use your equipment, or what you can do with the equipment, or what you can store on your laptop, or if you take that laptop home, is that okay? All kinds of procedures and so forth on how to do things. And then that leads us right into policies. This whole idea of data, I'm way over here, being an important asset, there are always security policies for every organization. NIACC has them, Facebook has them, Facebook has them, Google has all kinds of security policies, college, banks, where you work, your insurance companies, anybody that deals with data, personal data of anybody, has policies on how they're going to manage that. Or policies where you work, do you have to change your password every once in a while, and so forth. A lot of places also have guidelines. Guidelines would be a little bit different maybe. They're like a policy, but they're just, you ought to do this. There's all kinds of guidelines for security. You ought to be careful what you click on when you get an email. You ought to be careful about this. There might not be a specific policy, but there's guidelines that you should follow in order to stay more secure. So we looked at the big picture. I gave a quick example. I'll talk about this one. How did Target get hacked before Thanksgiving? Well, these were the bad guys. They hacked into the HVAC company, and the HVAC happened to have a connection going right into Target. Well, once they got hacked into here, they were able to send some traffic from here into here, and what they did here at the checkout is they were watching the information move through the checkout. So when somebody swiped their debit card, debit information is not stored anywhere, so you swipe your card, put in your PIN, and when that was happening, the bad guys were watching. So this is actually happening during processing. Okay, it wasn't data that was stored anywhere, and it wasn't data actually moving from one major network to another. It was data that was right in memory and being processed by the CPU, and they had a little program in there that was looking at it and keeping track of it as it went by. Crazy. Anyway, here's an example, like a firewall. You can set up a firewall on your PC. Typically, a firewall will let information out and then back in where it came from. But if the information generates from the outside of the firewall, just like an example, some tries to come in from the outside that didn't generate on the inside, Most firewalls will stop that unless it's given permission to get in. Whew, talk more about firewall. Next thing, some more terms. Yeah, okay, let's do this. An asset. In this class, we're talking about data. Is there a threat against the asset? Could that data be compromised? And what would happen to it? You give up confidentiality, or is there a chance somebody could change the data? Two major things, basically. We're talking about security. Is there a threat agent? Is there somebody that can carry out the threat? Can they carry out the threat? And are you vulnerable to that? Could it actually happen? Sounds funny, but really, are you vulnerable? Could the threat happen? Is there an agent that will carry out the vulnerability? Are you vulnerable? You know, yeah, so the chances of getting robbed might be different in an inner city neighborhood that has lots of problems with theft than it might be in a neighborhood in the suburbs where, you know, how vulnerable are you? I mean, could it happen? Okay? And then you measure your risks. You know, are you going to protect that? Okay? Are you going to take steps to protect that? Okay? And that can cause resources, money, or whatever. Okay? I read an article once that big banking firms, they're not completely secure because it would just be too much effort, too much cost to actually secure them entirely. You know, what steps would you have to take? It's like, do you lock your car while it's locked in the garage? Do people have home burglar systems? You know, do they, you know what I mean? So you decide, well, the chances of us getting robbed are pretty slim. Do we spend the money on a burglar system? I don't, you know, you measure your risk and decide. And if something's risky and you can't afford not to take care of the risk, well, then you move the risk. That sounds funny, but an example would be you buy insurance. You know, people, they have insurance on their cars, so if they run in and maim somebody for life, it doesn't destroy them because they have insurance that will cover the cost of that. You have insurance to cover the cost of your car if it gets, you know, house burns down. It doesn't happen very often, but you can't afford to lose your house and not have some insurance to pay so you can build another house. Okay, you can do this. In some cases, they move the risk. You know, instead of buying insurance, you move the risk. Example would be, yeah, give me the example up here. You're here, and what you can do is you can move the data to the cloud and let somebody else worry about the risk and just pay them to take care of it. Back it up and do all the stuff you need to do with it. So you don't have to worry about securing it. It's being secured somewhere else in the cloud. Of course, you have to trust them to secure it. Alright, we finished up. Let me see if I can show you this here. Might be a little hard to see, but the students, we were logged into our account, and then we use this word right here. If you type that while you're logged in to your account on the work server, that is the one when you're in the room 172.31.0.85, and the public address 207.165.226.185. So that's the public address. So if you're at home or somewhere else, so you log into that. In this case, we were using Putty. That's not very secure because we have a generic password. So you can change the password. Okay, so here's that account I'm using as a demo in the class, Dirksen J.A. That's Jody Ann, my wife. Okay, password for Jody A. So it makes you type the current password so somebody else can't change your password. So you type the current one in, and then you type the 2 new passwords here. Now, and then, yeah, everything's okay. One important point about this, if you forget this password, you contact Mr. Dirksen. You contact me. The help desk can't fix that for you, nor can Mr. Purchase change that for you. I manage this computer, this server, so if you forget this password, okay, you'll need to contact me if you can't get logged in. Alright, last thing, groups. You need to think about what groups you want to use for Friday. Friday we've got a group project in class. It's like a little bit of the skills-based assessment. You're going to work in groups. I guess it could be a group of 1 if you want to. And you're going to gather up information on campus. You can gather up some information on campus. With computers, IP addresses, just a variety of things in different locations on campus. So it may not take you the full hour, but you'll meet in the classroom. Somebody will be there to check you in, make sure everything's straight, and then from there you will get in your groups and do the project. And we'll talk more about it on Wednesday. That is it for today.